I'll be away for just 5 minutes.
Okay, Joe.
Okay, so let's start with Ingress then. So Ingress is like let's say Nginx Ingress chart, right? What it does is it hosts an Nginx container with Nginx running Nginx. Now normally what happens whenever you need to whenever you are exposing Nginx to the external world, here's a reverse proxy. You will expose that and then you will configure certain routes, right? A context path as a normal practice. And then when somebody hits your domain slash this context path, go to this service, route this to this service. Now these configs were normally maintained in an nginx.conf file, which is normally manually prepared. And every time you needed to onboard a new service to the environment, you had to modify the config file, commit it, and then restart the app, and then you have the new config. The nginx now has a new config. Now, what the Nginx Ingress or the Ingress resource will do is it's a resource, Kubernetes resource. What it does is when you describe certain things like this path, you route it to whenever somebody is hitting this path for this domain, route it to this service. That is the description of what an Ingress will do. Okay, so here if you see, we are defining an ingress, saying the name is this, the namespace is this, and what we're saying is the host is this one, and what the main part comes here, wherein we are saying that uh, whenever the path is slash user OTP, the host is this, you route it to this. Okay. Now Zool colon 8080 is a service within the cluster. So whenever you it just basically that whenever it comes as slash user OTP, somebody is typing this, you route that same request without any modifications to this service. So it will just replace this. Instead, it will put this Zool colon 8080 slash user OTP and forward the same request what's come. Once the response comes from Zool, it will revert back the same response to the end user. Okay, that is the definition how we are defining it in terms of Kubernetes as an ingress resource, right? Once we define that, what happens is you have various implementations of ingress. Nginx ingress is one of the implementation of an ingress. Now the other things would be traffic, right? Traffic, and then HA proxy. So there are many such also resources, Envoy ingress proxy. So all of those, right? So what they do is they also offer bindings which says where they will also listen to these ingress resources and create routes and stuff. Now we use Nginx for the ingress implementation. So what Nginx ingress does is it'll keep watching if anybody wants a new ingress, right? Which means anyone wants to expose any new service to the external world. What it'll then do is it will simply catch the exact. It'll optimize. Refactor or add those lines of code into that Nginx config file. Or if you delete a resource, then it will delete the config file for that the particular resource. If you are doing user OTP, if you add a resource called user OTP ingress, it will add an entry in the Nginx config file. Okay, and do a soft reload on the Nginx ingress. So that is the work of the ingress itself. Now there are some
So
other.
basically, it just automatically creates that configuration, is it? Like overall use of it.
It just maintains the Nginx config file.
Okay.
Okay, you
So
need
before that, we used to add for both for Zool. Then for Zool, you have written your own script, is it, to
Yeah,
add the route?
yeah, welcome back. Okay, so first thing is this. So what happens is when you add the Nginx ingress route, okay, it is similar concept. What happens is you will add a route here. When you add a route here, you don't have to modify the config file yourself. The ingress will automatically generate those config files. That's all. Okay, and not just for routes. It does it for various things like SSL certificate. Basically, it will handle the generation of an Nginx config,
Uh,
entire life cycle of an Nginx config. Nothing else. That's the only thing. The job of an ingress is how to generate config files for Nginx. Dynamically based on whatever you want, it will generate. Excuse me. So the Zool thing, right now, I'll just show that. Now, based on this concept, we've done a similar thing for Zool. Okay, it's not exactly how this one is done because that is a separate ingress resource. So in this, what we are adding is we add a annotation into the services. Okay, whenever you deploy a service resource, we add an annotation says Zool/route path user OTP. Okay, and this is used by the Zool container to auto generate the uh, Zool routes dot properties. Okay, so if you can see Zool Kubernetes Discovery, right? So that is a small app that that is being written. What that will just do is it will just always keep checking. Okay, is there any service added which has a certain certain annotation called Zool/route path. If it is there, it will set up route which says if it is slash route user OTP, send it to slash user OTP. That's all. Now these route properties before we used to maintain it manually.
So this discovery basically contains the code, right, where loads all, it goes through all the YAMLs and fetch that Zool property, right, from there.
It will construct the this file. That's all.
Okay, okay, yeah. So you remember before when Shiva was there, before we used to write for Nginx also, right? Similar stuff. So now Ingress take care of it, right?
Yeah, Ingress.
So like that for Zool, it is not available.
No. Zool is not available. So by
Okay, okay.
default, nobody has an open source thing is not done. That's why we only written a small library.
Because soft reload, we don't have soft reload for Zool, right? Okay.
So of course we can add all of those. It depends on how useful they are. Again, this is
Yeah.
a small service. It's Golang service. It's just about like 50, 60 lines of code.
Okay.
Okay, it just keeps pinging this thing, all the services, list the services. It will pick the particular annotation, route path, right? Route path. It will just pick that annotation. If that annotation exists, it will create it's normal Golang template. It will just create this file. That's all. Nothing else. Okay, it will create it. Then you have the file mounted, and then you can, whenever you restart it, the init container will make that file and provide it to you. Now, if you are not working in a Kubernetes environment, then you can again use this container, or if not, you can provide an hard-coded route dot properties like we used to do before also. Okay, so Ingress used to do those kind of things, and Zool will do the the route dot property creation. Here it will do the Nginx configuration file creation on manager. That's the only difference between those two. So Ingress will do a little, a couple other things as well, apart from just, I mean, it will basically maintain the entire Nginx config file, but apart from just setting up routes, it will also take care of, renewing and maintaining the SSL certificates. Now, Ingress itself will not have any code per se to do anything as to renew or put any certificates. What it does is Ingress will have the provision to mount particular secrets, right, and serve those as SSL certificates. Now, these secrets, who generates these certificates and installs them into a secret, that will be cert manager. Now, what Ingress will do will just use those secrets which is there in the Kubernetes environment, mount it to the file system, and will serve it for any requests that come. It will use that SSL certificate. Okay. Now, cert manager itself is the one that will actually generate and maintain the certificates. Okay, so we use mainly just Let's Encrypt staging and Let's Encrypt for certificates. Always, it's a good recommended practice to start with staging, right? Whenever you are doing Let's Encrypt here, you always start the root ingress with Let's Encrypt staging, because Let's Encrypt prod will have certain limitations as to number of certificates you can issue. Okay, and same domain you can't, if you imagine you have 500 subdomains, you cannot issue so many certificates at once. Or if you've configured something wrong, and then if you try to ensure issue certificates on the prod thing, then you might again exceed the limits, and you might not be able to get those certificates again for, let's say, a month also, right? So it's always good to first try with staging so that everything is working fine. If it's working, the next thing would be to switch to prod, and then you'll get the actual official support.
So this Let's Encrypt is like a free provider, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is what username, or what is it? Let's Encrypt hyphen prod.
So that is basically where you see this cert manager, right? So here there will be two cluster issuers that you set up.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
one is a prod cluster issuer, one is a, let's say, staging cluster issuer.
Okay.
You can pick whichever issuer. So basically, what will happen is, when you let's encrypt staging, it will use this use this URL, and you use
Hmm.
prod, it will use this URL.
Okay.
Okay, just think of it as your dev and prod server. Okay, do you
Okay.
want to do testing with dev first, or do you want to do it with prod? Dev will
Hmm.
be for your testing, it won't be valid, but then production will be the actual certificate.
Oh.
Uh, so in the cluster configs, whenever you deploy, there's a main ingress called root ingress. This root ingress will have the TLS specifications. Okay, so it says who is the cluster issuer for you, right? Now we are saying that the cluster issuer here is cert issuer is the Let's Encrypt prod. Now, if you are choosing a different thing, maybe a different kind of issuer, Acme or something, you can always use that particular issuer as well. Okay, or if you are deploying it in a certain environment and they have a certain issuer, you can always set the appropriate annotations. Okay. So this is mostly about the Ingress part of it. So what Ingress does, it maintains the entire life cycle of a Nginx config file. Now Nginx config file can deal with a lot of things like whatever Nginx config file normally offers, right? You have things like routes, basic routes. You have things like wildcard certificates, SSL certificate, regular ones, mounting those, providing those certificates. Then you have things like rewriting URL, rewriting that part of it also. So all of these various features, if you want caching can also be done, right? All of these various features, WAF can be enabled. All these are part of Nginx. All these are part of Nginx. These features are given by Nginx. If you go here, again you get a wealth of documentation of each and every annotation, what happens when you use each and every config map, what happens when you use this, right? You can use that to tweak the entire Ingress itself. There's extended documentation for this. We can always, you can go and if there is a particular feature you want to do with Nginx, then you can explore how can you do it with Ingress, and follow that up. Okay, so that is the Nginx Ingress part of it mostly. Any questions here?
So this certificates, in which pod they are present? Security certificate.
So certificates, right? So certificates are always generated by
Cert manager.
cert manager. Okay,
Okay.
they get,
Okay.
once they're generated, they store it in a secret.
Okay.
Okay, to do get secret. Phone number, I have access to. Okay. So whenever you do get secret, what will happen? You save that entire certificate into a secret, which says egovmicrodev.egovernment.org. So what
Okay.
secret will contain is the public key, the private key, all of it will contain.
Hmm.
Okay, now what Ingress will do whenever the cert manager says that this certificate, this secret has now the secret has now actual data has been injected to it. Uh,
Hmm.
Same as you remember how it used to check for any changes and this to refresh and do a soft reload. Here
Yeah.
also does the same thing. It keeps checking. Okay, does the secret have new information? Yeah, new information has come through. So let me re-update it. It will mount that secret into the file system. It will start using that certificate after that.
Okay.
So it will be
So,
stored in the Kubernetes itself.
so this certificates we use for SSL, right? For HTTPS to
Yeah.
provide HTTPS connection. So that is happening at Zool or means Zool or it's abstracted to another layer or internally also internally which HTTP right? Without
Yeah.
S.
So till Nginx Ingress, right, we'll have HTTP, TPS.
Okay.
At
So
Nginx Ingress, we will terminate the SSL. From then on, it's HTTP.
okay. So basically only in Ingress pod will have access to that secret keys, right?
Yeah, yeah, no one else. Only the Ingress will have access.
Oh, oh.
Also, Cert Manager because Cert Manager will have to
Yeah.
have access, so that will also have. Okay, that's great. Again, SSL Cert Manager, if you go, you will have detailed documentation. So what
Hmm.
Cert Manager does is also schedules these renewals. Okay, so if every time, whenever Let's Encrypt issues the certificate for 3 months. Okay.
Okay.
Normally,
Hmm.
Task Manager will start 20 days before itself. It will start checking, okay, can I regenerate new certificates and renew it, and the same flow will happen. As in, Cert Manager gets the certificates, it puts it into the secret. Now, Nginx Ingress will figure out that, okay, it'll now know that the secret has changed. It'll,
Hmm.
put the mount the new files, and
Hmm.
then soft reload the Nginx one. So you have a new certificate. And this keeps happening.
So this auto renewal is taken care by Kubernetes cron config, or we have wrote how is it done
So Cert Manager. So they have inbuilt scheduler.
in
Okay.
Kubernetes only, right?
No, no, not Kubernetes. Inside of Cert Manager,
Okay.
they'll have a polling mechanism which keeps checking, are the certificates getting old? Are they getting old? Do I have any pending thing? And it'll do based on that. Now, when you have multiple replicas, right? Cert Manager and this thing, you will figure out who is the leader. Okay, that is why they will try to obtain a lock on a config map which will give them this thing as to who is the leader. If you have multiple replicas of Cert Manager, one pod will become leader, and that pod will do the this thing. It keeps reloading. Okay, should I generate any certificate? Should I generate any certificate? Something is getting expired, it'll regenerate the certificate. Okay, so other part of it is OAuth. Okay, so we use OAuth proxy for you must have seen uh, in a lot of areas right now, mostly in things like monitoring, tracing, and stuff. Right before you used to need a basic username and password. Now what that used to do is every time you put in that username and password, you had to share it to someone else. Then you would never know that who's done what, or if somebody is leaving the organization, 100 people know that password. Because one guy is leaving, you can't rechange that password as such because they have to communicate to all 100 people. Right? That entire normal issues of this thing is always there. Okay? uh, so that is one of the problems with using a basic auth. So for that, what we've done is we've gone out with this OAuth proxy. So this is also an open source thing. It's a good project, as in, and it's also linked with Ingress, Nginx Ingress, right? So what happens is when you put in if you can see the OAuth to proxy chart, it has all the documentation as well. Okay, you will have plenty of documentations. So what we do is for a given set of path, right? A given path like tracing, monitoring, what we say is we give the authentication to GitHub. So the auth will happen through GitHub and it will pass on saying if this user is the user what he is claiming to be. Okay. That OAuth then gives the cookie to the OAuth part. GitHub will then give pass the cookie which has the roles as well. If it is part of the roles that you want, it will grant him access. If not, it will deny him access. Okay, if you see the OAuth configurations, okay, you can see here that you are saying that in the give access to GitHub organizations, e-governments, and whoever has whichever member has one of these associations with the teams. So if he's part of microservice dev or DevOps, give him access. Okay, that is what we are saying here.
So this is basically RBAC filters are providing using this.
Okay. Okay. So if you see here, you have annotation saying that please use auth URL as OAuth. Right? This is the difference that comes these two annotations. When you add these two, it will automatically because it's part of Nginx ingresses this thing. And then when you put this annotation, Nginx ingress will will again regenerate the config file Nginx con to route the authentication to OAuth to proxy pod, and the auth will happen from there. So this will not have RBAC. I mean, it will have RBAC in the sense you can do a role based allowing to the entire application. Okay, you cannot
Mhm.
say that okay, certain features can be available in this thing. You can only say for this URL. Okay, say slash monitoring. Entire thing you should allow it to certain roles. Okay, that's
Okay.
the only thing you can do.
So whole namespace you're allowing for a particular group, right? GitHub group.
No, 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 not whole namespace. We are allowing one particular path. Okay, as in egov microdev slash monitoring, egov microdev slash tracing.
Hmm.
Okay. To that URL, if anybody goes, you will be able to add authentication, GitHub authentication to that application. Okay. The
Okay.
application itself will not have any line of code for any authentication.
Hmm.
Okay. But because of this OAuth proxy, you can get proper GitHub authentication just by adding this annotation.
Okay.
Okay, so imagine us, we have citizen employee login, right? Now we need that login, we only handle everything. Now imagine what's happening here is you don't have any login system implemented, but because you have work proxy, you can reuse that, you reutilize that authentication scheme for all the other applications. Or things like Jaeger and all of that, you can just add a authentication layer with it just by adding two annotations.
Mhm. So
And
means we are just using our GitHub logins, right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, reusing our GitHub.
If somebody leaves the organization now, you will
Mhm.
remove his GitHub ID, which means his accesses of all the things that are got through this team is also now revoked.
Okay.
Okay, before what is happening, we used to have passwords, right? Now you have shared the password among 10, 15 people. If one guy leaves, if you change the password, then you have to also go inform everybody,
Yeah.
right? So now you have a SSO kind of thing where you can easily revoke those
Okay.
things. Okay. So you can see this can be added onto any ingress of any of like any of your services. Okay. All you need to do, this ingress block will anyways be there. What we can add is this part of it. You can say additional annotations, add these two annotations. That's all. Which means if the OAuth2 proxy is already deployed in the cluster, it will automatically now have GitHub authentication. Um, more detailed things will be here. To what each of the configurations will do. But This is the standard configuration that we will use. How this entire thing is working. Okay, the flows are all described, but the standard flow what we are going to follow is this. As in, we are always going to have a authorization. I mean, GitHub authentication based on our e-government thing and whichever teams. Now, in each environment, you have such team. Now, imagine if it is PBUAT. Somebody is asking, I need access to, let's say, the uh, Punjab UAT's dashboard, right? Any such things. So which group he has to be there. So that will be governed by this, whatever you put here. So if you need to know, then you will know that, okay, if you are part of any of these groups, you will have access to the dashboards in PB Prod V2, for instance. Okay, so that is how you figure out like this is what the access is bound by this file here.
So by default, if we don't add those two properties, then it won't. Everyone will have access, right?
So if you put star, then everybody will have access.
Okay.
I think even if you don't put anything, I don't know if you will get it. If everybody will have to check.
No, I'm saying in service you have to put those two properties, right? If you want to enable OAuth in that.
So this the other one drawback in this, right? You can only have this as of now. At least what we figured, what I figured out is maybe if you search more that find it throughout the entire environment is being deployed to, right? You have this
Mm-hmm.
kind of rule set. It means PV prod, PVUAT, DevOps. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you can't have this thing saying tracing will have only PV prod access, but
Yeah.
monitoring will have
Mm.
PVUAT and DevOps access.
So if you, yeah, means everyone will have access.
That's the this thing problem. I mean, not a problem, a limitation because sometimes you might want to give tracing access to a group, but
Mm.
monitoring access to another group or logging access to another group, right? So that
Mm. Yeah.
could be a use case. That's why I've not found such use cases. But if
Mm.
there is such a use case, then we'll have to figure out what else. Maybe run two or two proxy parts. Of course, that will fix it. But
Mm.
there could be some other, more elegant alternative.
Mm.
That will Any questions, Nikesh? Nikesh, Gaju,
No.
Gaju, what Gaju now? Let's see you guys want
So
to.
Nitin,
Yeah,
in that auto key rotation, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that free account which we use, that free provider, its username password also will be hashed only, right? Or how is it stored?
No, actually, this thing that we don't have any that no account as such that you will have.
Oh, there is no account
What
only.
you will do is you will just anybody can request it. You will just give an email ID to register yourself, and you will
Mm-hmm.
not have a password as such. You will just have an email ID. You should tie the certificate to that email ID because it's nothing, right? All you
Mm-hmm.
have to do is how the SSL auth will happen.
Mm-hmm.
The provider, the Let's Encrypt work will be this. Okay. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
whenever somebody says ego microdev, okay,
Mm-hmm.
my domain, I need to get an SSL certificate for it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What Let's Encrypt will tell is whenever you are, let's say you are running a command line tool which says get me a, you're calling Let's Encrypt tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get me a certificate passing argument ego microdev.
Mm-hmm.
What it will do is it will start it will give you a code normally, okay, some kind of a text. Okay. Your job will be when you access a particular URL, that text should be displayed.
Mm-hmm.
When you do ego microdev slash let's encrypt validation, you should
Mm-hmm.
give that text. Okay, that is that text let's encrypt will give you. Okay. Then what
Okay.
it will do, let's encrypt will call the Google DNS or any DNS and check ego microdev which server is it pointing to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then with that server, it will call the exact path and it will expect to get that value that Let's Encrypt wants to. With that,
Okay.
it will complete your testing. Basically, it's like an OTP validation.
Hmm.
Okay, it wants to verify. So that's all Let's Encrypt will do. What it will do is, does this whoever is claiming to be, does he actually own the the domain itself?
Dominance.
And
Okay.
if he owns the domain, then he is going to get the certificate.
Okay. Got it.
Now there's another part to the Ingress itself, that is the WAF. Okay. Again, this is not something you can go here. So, you will get all the WAF stuff. Use the Lua WAF only.
And this WAF only, I guess, rate filtering and that also will be there.
Yeah. Okay. Here you can just check all of this. Rate limiting is part of a different this thing, but then WAF. Yeah, I'll just show you. I'll just show what exactly WAF does. So you can see all of these things, right? Whatever you're setting, right, setting various headers. You can always go through the values.yaml, you'll find all of this. So we'll be setting all of these things. So these are all part of security itself. So these are standard security practices. Also, whenever we do a certain, um, let's say we give the security testing and all of that, right? They usually give you a certain recommendation as to what headers need to be sent out. Okay. So whenever somebody is telling that, okay, you need to add certain headers, you can add them here. Okay. These are all standard headers that are added. So you can add those things here. Okay. That is there. Just check the WAF part of it. Okay. And the SSL ciphers and stuff are also controlled here. Normally, for all the latest uh, clusters, we use the SSTLS 1.2 or 1.3. When you enable 1.2, 1.3, some compatibility matrix will be lesser. As in very old Android devices will not be able to connect to the site. Okay. Again, these are in the dev or environment variable file, so that you can figure out which is the some states might want to support very old browsers as well. So based on that, you can figure out what you want to exactly show itself. Okay. Then I think it's part of the red playthrough. Hello.
Hey, we lost your screen share, Nitin.
You talking now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, so by default, you have Ingress also supports uh, the WAF also. So WAF is basically your web application firewall. So by default, we enable WAF for all our services, like whichever is then using the common chat. Okay. But there are some cases maybe you want to disable WAF as well. Maybe file store APIs, you might want to disable WAF, or there's maybe certain use cases are there. Like for instance, things like OAuth proxy, we disable WAF, right? Because there could be sometimes what used to happen is it used to detect certain tokens like the cookies that it offer as a potential threat, right? Because of some false positive. So those kind of things you might have to disable. So whenever you want to disable in the ingress, you can just do ingress WAF enabled false. Okay, by default is always enabled true. Now here there are a couple of things. These are also part of Nginx annotations itself. You will be adding a certain things like now do you want to process the body uh, of the request, multi-part body itself, which means usually those are files, right? Which means when you're doing file approach, do you want to process those? Or do you want to allow unknown content time? Because the Lua STWAF will have certain content time which is already recognized and rules are set up. Maybe those might be things like applications slash JSON, right? JSON, XML, those will be supported. Now, if it is out of its supported list, do you want to reject the request? So for that, we are saying don't reject it, allow those unknown content types as well. Now, this is an important thing. This part of it is the WAF score threshold. Now, what this one does is every time somebody tries to do a, let's say, attempt a SQL injection or header manipulation or cross-site scripting, if they want to do, if they try to attempt to do any such thing, WAF will give a threshold, a score for each of those things, right? If there's a SQL injection attempt, it will rank those things. Okay, I think with a certain degree of confidence, I can say that this is SQL injection attack. Okay, and it will give a rating, maybe 10, 20, 30. And for a certain thing, maybe it just has a in the query parameter, maybe it just has a word called select. Okay, now select by itself is not a SQL injection, but it would still assign it some points, maybe called 3. Okay, now in that case what will happen is here it will check the threshold. You set the threshold to 10. Can I allow it or not? Now if it's below the threshold value, it will allow that request, otherwise it will throw a 403 or 401. Okay, so what happens here in such cases where an actual SQL injection is trying to happen with certain symbols, or maybe some cross-site scripting is happening, somebody is trying to do, and you have that in the query parameters or anywhere else in the URL. If it is past that threshold, then it will throw that error saying that this is request is rejected by the WAF, and then you will also get the in the Nginx log saying why it was rejected. Okay, maybe it got this request came in and it got rejected because of this reason. Now, based on that reason, you can always customize to see whether you need to allow this request or not, or increase the threshold. Now, this threshold value also you can increase per service basis or per environment basis as well. A particular environment, maybe like a PB or any other Uttarakhand, might want to have a lenient WAF for whatever reason. Okay, but someone else, everyone else will want to have a stricter WAF. So stricter WAF, you can have 510 score of threshold of 5 and 10. Now the more detailed description as to how these things are ranked and stuff, you can get in the WAF itself.
So we can have our own implementation of that calculation, or it's
You
by
could.
default.
Yeah, I mean, by default, you won't be able to do it. It's quite, you need to edit a lot of code and stuff. So what
Okay.
you can do is you can say which rules, maybe you want to block a certain rule set, that you can do.
Okay.
Maybe a certain rule set is not good for you, that those rules you can block, or certain rules you want to ignore, that you can do, or you can set the threshold value. Normally you can control it with threshold value, which says medium to most. catches, you catch. Don't catch all false positives. False positives could be, like I said, maybe having a select and inverted comma and
Hmm.
our like or a round bracket closing. That could mean that maybe it is a SQL injection, but it does not qualify. It's not actually a SQL injection. It could
Hmm.
just be some kind of an input, a comment section or something where people are writing those things. Okay, so you should not ignore those, right? So it will be a decent amount of false positives that you can set with that value. More details, this thing is always already there. Part of they have an entire very detailed description of it. How you can skip certain rules, how you can add certain rules, right? So those things are also yeah. So by here you can also say what are the major rules that are defined, and what are the rules defined. Also, you can see in the files itself. Okay, and in those files you can always ignore certain rules for yourself. Maybe you feel that these rules you don't need it, you need to disable that. You can always disable. Now I told you that they have a certain score that is allotted for each of them, right? So that you can see here. If there is a certain thing, maybe there's a different a weird request that's coming in, it will set a score for, okay, this is rule is matching true, then I'll give it a score of 2. Now, when all the rules match and if the score is above 10, is when that request gets rejected. Any questions on this?
So we can add our own rules also, right?
You could, theoretically, you could, but it's not so straightforward.
Not straightforward. Okay.
There are a lot of this thing, anything involving things like Nginx and right? Most of it is written in C. Okay, so
Okay.
although the rule sets are in JSON, you can add it. It's
Hmm.
not the most straightforward thing, but yeah, you can do it.
I was thinking like something like that size thing, right? Size thing or something we can add there.
Preferably, right? These kind of things, if anything is a little more thing, it's best to add it in the rule as
Zone fit.
setting because that is a place where you can actually write code and maintain it very easily.
Hmm.
Now, this Ingress thing is best to use it as a package that comes as is.
Okay.
Now, anyway, since you have an API gateway, it makes sense to do those things.
Hmm.
Ideally, these things, whatever we are doing, right, in Lua, STWAS, that ideally should also be part of the API gateway. Okay, because these are function of the API gateway, not the reverse proxy. Reverse proxy's job should be SSL termination and just telling if this path comes, which service I should forward the request to, and that's it. But because this is already very well adapted, documented, and
But if like someone sends a very big request, right, which could cause OM to get killed.
just one second. Yeah, what are you asking, Nikhil?
So I was thinking, we were thinking about that blocking request above certain size, right? So that pod doesn't crash. Or
Oh yeah, so
so one
usually
if yeah,
okay,
sorry.
so Nginx will not it won't do that because so Nginx there's not much no serialization or anything going on. So it'll just as the request is issued, it'll try and forward the same. So usually none of those things will happen in Nginx. What can happen is rule level.
But won't like someone can target Zool pods means Zool pod might fail, right? If it fetches too means very large amount of data or
Again, rule also so by default we anyways have those max request headers set. So how much
okay.
can
Okay.
allowed even in Nginx, saying
Hmm.
that if the file limit and all we have set, right? Now the other
Okay.
body and all is less than 1 MB, but only for files whenever it's multi-part, it's more higher 5 MB or something.
Okay. It's already there. Yes.
Those basic things are there. Now, when you want more customized things, certain things, certain objects should not be more higher and all that, right? That you
Hmm.
can evaluate. Now Zool by itself will not fail when you get just the request, because the request, right? Only when you serialize those requests will they take more memory into certain.
Yeah.
When it's going in a plain text, it doesn't really take much, right?
Okay.
So, and that plain text wala thing is anyways limited. You can't send like 15 MB JSON or something.
Hmm.
Those kind of things will anyways be.
Okay.
Nitin, that WAF and custom header is the same thing. It's just
No, no, that is different thing. They both act in tandem, like both are important, like both fight a similar cause. But then yeah, I mean, WAF does filtering of requests. Headers are something that you send out. Like when you're sending response headers, you can add more headers. So that is both are part of engineering.
okay.
Any more questions? Trading, logging, Terraform. And okay. Anything else? If they want to say anything.
No.
We'll pick up the other topics tomorrow, Mojo. Logging, tracing, and probably Terraform is there. Yeah, okay. Then there's some other stuff. Hello. Okay, Gaju, you can stop recording. Yeah. Stop.
Okay, Nitin, I'll drop off.
Yeah. Bye.